I share this space with Otterson, and she's an amazing artist, dancer. She instructs ballet dancing. Her company's called Lavish. They travel everywhere. And we met just a few months ago. We used to be across the street, and we met a few months ago, and it was a match. So I'm delighted. Our series is normally on Friday nights. We call them KFB Fridays or Footsie Fridays because, as you know, we are shoe-free here. Also, next week, we have two wonderful poets, Lynn Crosby and Kinesia Lubrin, will be here next Friday night, a night not to be missed. Then Meet the Presses, we're going to be Meet the Presses, something I know Mr. Power is involved with heavily. It's our first time at Meet the Presses. This is a indie literary market that's at Trinity St. Paul, in the backspace there. Quite lovely. So we'll be showing some wares. The poetry shop is up front. I'll be hanging out a bit afterwards if you want to peruse and check that out. Our poets have books here this evening. Have I missed anything? I have.
I'm too nervous.
You're too nervous? I love that can still happen. And I appreciate that. I'm a little nervous myself. I'm going to introduce our poets tonight. I'll read their bios. They're known as many things. I'll let Nicholas cover that. But Lillian Necakov is the author of Sickbed of Dogs by Woolsack and Wynne, Polaroids from Coach House, Hat Trick from Exile Editions, The Bone Broker, Mansfield Press, Hooligans, and I love your shirt for Hooligans, love, Mansfield Press, and The Lake Contains an Emergency Room, one of the most beautiful books I've seen of that year, put out by Apartment 9, brilliant press. Jim Smith is the author of 15 books and chapbooks published including
I'm not nervous.
published 100 Most Frightening Things, Convincing Americans. Those are kind of synonymous, right? The Schwarzenegger poems, Translating Sleep, Back Off Assassin, and Happy Birthday, Nicanor Parra. Their Mansfield Press put out the last two. Nicholas Power is a founding member of Meet the Presses Literary Collective, performs in wild places with the River Poets. Do you really do that in wild places?
Yeah. In fact, Toronto has a lot of wilderness in it that I've personally got lost in.
We need to talk more about hitting some wild places. Okay. He's been published by Text Editions. That's Melancholy Scientist, which is excellent. I can highly recommend. And he's also the publisher of his own Gesture Press. Darlings, I'm so glad you're here. Please welcome Nicholas Power.
Well, thanks a lot for that, Kurt. I'd get into talking about the wild places, but I'm not going to be reading from that kind of work. But the River Poets, we follow the lost rivers in Toronto, and I work with Maureen Hines and Maureen Scott Harris, who are terrific poets, and we write for those places, and we read them in those places, so it's really great. But I want to talk about whatever the heck we are as a trio, which has been very interesting the way it's developed. Really, it's because Andrew over here named us small, medium, and large, that we became an entity. But, I think we've evolved beyond that name. We were for a time the Catholic Communist Writing Group. And tonight I think we're three individuals with some poetry, some of which I'm going to read right now, that came out of workshops that we do together. So this first poem, we were actually listening to a tape of a Welsh poet reading in Welsh, in Wales, I presume. And we were just all writing while he's reciting in his language. So you're using other sources to prompt the poem. So this is a very short one called, I'll Write an Ode and Die. I'll write an ode or die. I'll make a poetry revolution. Forget Auden. I'm as Canadian as burlap. I'm Trotsky playing hockey. I'm playing drunk laser tag. The same dance, the same city, but oh, let's go to Disney World. I've lost my name for myself. Only the Welsh poets know the name for the night, my twin. I stay away from statistics. Order will ruin our household. The machines have come to a standstill. And this second one, we were listening to, well, actually, it's the poem comes out of a transliteration, which for me is a movement from one language or one source to the poem, of an Italian translation of lines 45 to 51 of Howl by Allen Ginsberg. So we took something that people, might have read a few times, but it's been translated into Italian, and then we see where that will take us. So we've had fun writing on the spot and then sharing what we're doing, and then this is an edited version of what we were working on. And over the at least 2.5 years that we've been together, we've been to Montreal, we've read in Kingston, and this is our second reading here in Toronto.
Thank you.
And our goal is to get to Hamilton, really.
Within the decade.
Within the decade, that's right. Okay, so this is called A Different Kind of Pilgrimage, which I think our slow movement through the poetry world is what. A Different Kind of Pilgrimage, with thanks to Allen Ginsberg. She goes down the Camino, leaning on the horn of her truck, scraping paint off the fenders in those narrow streets, more sanguine than a villager after a noon meal. Her nerves at ease inside her closed doors, leaving behind her troubled history. She sees a future in steam from her coffee, creating her own grand European melodrama, in a constant war against sadness and boredom, briefly interrupting herself and her mirror reflection. She makes out of her truck a symbol of truth and strength. No diversions, no easy answers, no bad memories. An old Ford Transit, her movable base. She exhausts the fumes of her past. She enchants all her new lovers from the open door of her truck, spinning fantasies out of new wave films, breathing obscurity behind the wheel, sitting in her truck, philosophizing, sad music, no police, no pain, neither love nor attraction. Burning with desire beneath unfamiliar skies, trance-like in prolonged siesta, then circling the truck round the priests, scarcely touching those haughty teleologists, reveling in her ability to leave them unable to speak. Like candle smoke, she's gone by morning. And this one is kind of a tribute to part of what was Scream in Hyde Park, which unfortunately isn't part of the landscape anymore, but at a certain point they were doing things all week leading up to the big Scream in the Hyde Park venue. And what they did was do something called Poets in the Wild. And so Steve Venwright and I think Jenny Samparisi were dressed in khakis with binoculars and canvas hats and leading a group of people on a search for poets in the wild of the annex. Okay, so this is a bit of a tribute to that. Poets in the Wild. In a nearby park, an underground poet buries a tape of a group of women reciting. If you lean your ear down close to the hole, you can hear angelic voices singing. Do not feed the poet, the guide says, pointing to a heavily graffitied bench where the poet sits quietly in the park, reading the comics and the sports pages. A poet sits down beside a parking lot where a young man guards a gold chariot, bedecked for a Hare Krishna parade, and they converse in the early morning light. Two poets on the porch of a church where they never step inside to pray discuss the heist of several vans belonging to local religious cults. A man is walking his dog named Poet, while across the street a poet walks home. Bad poet. The man yells at his garbage-eating dog, while across the street The poet cringes. We circulate through streets of the city, alone on patios, in cafes and back rooms, unlicensed, unknown, and unfettered, thinking like criminals and acting like saints. Now, I do have to give a footnote. That was Dennis Lee on the other side of the street, and my friend Eddie Yanofsky walking a dog that he had inherited that had been named Poet. And Eddie's a poet as well. So, true story, and he eventually got to meet Dennis and apologize. Anyway, so it all worked out very well. And I'm going to read two more if I've got time. This is from a manuscript called Wild Uncertainties, and it's a book-length manuscript that starts with one word, and then using the Fibonacci sequence of adding 1 to 0, which is the starting point, and then adding 1 to the previous number, which was 1, you get 2, and then 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, and you're getting into bigger numbers very quickly. So these poems were determined in their number and in their length by the Fibonacci sequence. And this one is, as you can see, it's sort of on a, working with the curve of the universe, and this would be 233 words, which is as you get up into the sequence. And the title is in the first line. He constructs the poem like a Feynman diagram, each line the author of unknown and unseen texts. When he reads aloud, words remember themselves. Poems listening to their own inflections, whispers of other poets, others. A tree made from a paper bag, standing inside that paper bag. His ear obedient to syllables of speech, where words are least careless and less logical. Hearing the breath in the body, the rhythm of an ex-animal, first conceived with the relevance of the human voice, following a line already written down in the cells. His job, to put a frame around movements of clouds in the early morning light. The writing, an occasion of reverent familiarity, constantly going to impossible places. A dance of gratitude, serious play, tricky, improvised, down and dirty, complex, intense, and elusive, full of warnings and forgetfulness, traps and maneuvers, shadows and silhouettes. A walk around the world, letting go of maps and calculations. Cadences pouring in upon the page, an Irish welcome for each one. Opening the door and inviting in all sentient beings as guests. Waking in the early morning when the sky's transparent blue and crossed with high, thin clouds. He wonders about the hidden structure of the moment. Small differences in initial conditions, great differences in final phenomena. When light hits the tops of the trees and sunflowers turn in that direction, he's sitting on his bench, sketching the movements of the quotidian. The ongoing dream where everything is happening simultaneously in ephemeris time. His autobiography by other means with no storyline. A monk in the morning sweeping his wooden island. All the seasons coming to visit him. Eternity in the present only. Atomic memories forming constantly, simultaneously. A recall machine made of misinterpretation and field cancerization. Multiple misunderstandings springing up in the same location at the same time. Recurrent disturbances at the site of the incision. Millions of cells dividing, copying DNA into new cells. The imperfect as part of the process. A natural tendency toward disorder. Inevitable genetic errors. The evolutionary necessity of mutation. A kind of translational velocity in exuberant cells. Wild uncertainties. And I've been working on a whole series of poems called Squirrel Town, which started when our previous cocaine mayor was in power. And then I renovated those poems during the POTUS era that we're going through now. But I've taken a vow of silence for this evening on those poems, but I'm going to read very briefly to end this off what's called A Less Anxious Poem is the name of this poem. And again, it's a translation process where I get a poem every day from a group called poets.org, and mostly American poets. And this is a poem I wrote from taking the last line of that poet's poem and working backwards and rewriting. So I took what was, for that poet, an anxious poem, and that was part of the process they were writing, and without using any medication, made it into, I hope what will be a less anxious poem, but we'll see. You can be the judges of that. Breaking with that myth and so many others, myself in search of an incomparable color, the whole lost, but making and mixing the possible again. Sparklers, a way of dancing, a bright something, but not a line of poetry. Our monsters need a kind of Odysseus more than did antiquity. Say that in Greek, and there's something there. Not indifferent to things, not just standing by, looking at the consequences without a once upon a time story, living in sidereal time, standing by oceans. Too much hot air rusts everything. You catch the light, draw protection from it, capable of coming close to something. Your strength, the sense of swimming in your own skin, rolling in salt water. We encourage peacocks to strut when all we want to do is watch. While we put ourselves first, we turn our backs to the other. We try to forget the warships. What if we stopped listening for a God, heard the cries of people around us? I want to know the being of a thing. I want to get close to time. In her poem, she listed the trash picked up, parsed and repurposed, oil drills, warships, phenylcyclohexene. In the original poem, there was a thin gold edge on the water, clouds, dolphins, butterflies. Thank you.
Well, how do I follow that? Well, first I want to thank Kirby for this wonderful space and for having us here, but also just for the feeling of love and being treasured that he spreads in here. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And I only felt it for what, like 37 minutes. Yeah. Oh no, it's wonderful, Kirby. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And thanks to Nick and Lil, because I just realized that I've known them for more than half my life. We've known each other since '83. And in '83, I envied and admired your writing, and so just really nice that they actually agreed to sort of accept a washed-up old poet.
Oh.
You know, of minimal talents to just sort of take part in this workshop. And, you know, it's been more fun writing for the last couple of years. Just, you know, moments when I want to retire as a poet. You know, like it's Lil and Nick and this sort of fun that makes me nod. So, oh, good God. I was going to read what I think must be called blur. But no, it's called Gadget. This is done during one of our times together. The city hates me. It broke up with me twice, punched me on the nose once, and refused to look at me when I returned. I stopped returning, and that was it. I tried to improve myself. I looked at Nietzsche. I was far better off than Nietzsche. My shoes were shared with a large group, then a small group in slippers. I spent every cent I had, bought whispers, and hired a singer's dress. I tried to be perfect for you, but you never phoned. I ate food. I eliminated a kind of food, picked up after my dog, which made me feel older. I tried to be mature just for you, because I was obsessed. I bought a child and taught it to love me. Eventually, he pushed me into traffic, and you turned all the lights green. So I tried to be run over. I tried to be funny. Got only as far as looking squashed. I love you because I'm no longer alive. What the heck was that? Whoa! I don't know, but see, that's part of the fun of doing stuff with these guys. It's just exploring the unknown and then being able to sort of talk about it right away. What I did in August is actually in August I wrote a poem a day, and they're all small, they're all, they evoke certain clearly obsessions of mine. So I'll just give you a couple of them. This one is called Canada. This dog sled team has traveled from my childhood across the frozen tundra of the Cuban Missile Crisis, through the Atacama Desert under the watchful Christ of Elqui, was written down by Para, chastised by Para. This dog sled team sheds poems like clumps of fur, licked themselves into a coma, ate the last proof Hitler was alive and happy with witness protection. They're here now, outside the window. That's actually them making that some slightly musical. This is an obsession I've had probably since I was like 18 or something. Blake saw an angel at the top of the stair. They drank all night, shared a cup of bliss, but in the morning they were poor. And that night, poorer still. Blake spent years looking up staircases, saw so many things: spaceships, gene-modified corn doing the hoochie coo, cigarettes smoking themselves, oysters that had never opened up for anyone, but never an angel. And then he died. Yeah, okay, death is one of the obsessions. It's, so none of them seem to have title. Oh, this one I'll call businessman, banker, sailor, because it's on a piece of paper that had that on it.
A businessman, banker?
Banker, sailor.
A banker, sailor, okay, thank you.
In the other room, I hear Frank O'Hara read a poem to Mayakovsky. I wanted them both to shut up. They were in the hallway, bloody socks, their prints lined up along the gallery walls. Mayakovsky's whispering something. What does Frank think of that? He's my guest, and he spent so little time this side of the wall. Sure, I'd have to have a Coke with him, partly because I've never known a sailor, though the image of Genet with a pile of grapes. And I'd rather be friends with Mayakovsky. I'd rather be embarrassed by that voice, by that volume. His tone hushed. He sees the dune buggies lined up down Fifth Avenue as far as the hamburger joint. Oh, there's the hamburger joint. Okay. Dune buggies stacked outside his window, like he was on a container ship full of sailors, all heading to Fire Island. Everything is heading to Fire Island, forever. Frank says goodbye to Mayakovsky. Walks down the beach, key and cigarettes in hand. And I could probably spend the next hour explaining what the in-joke to only me is about all of this. Frank O'Hara, unfortunately, incredible poet, one of my faves, was killed by a dune buggy speeding over a dune on Fire Island, sort of hit him midsection. He died of internal injuries shortly thereafter. Hell of a way to go. Mayakovsky, well, we know who Mayakovsky is. And Jean Genet and the bunch of grapes I won't explain because I think there are people under 20 here. But it's how he appeared bigger than he was for sailors. I leave the rest to your imagination.
Thanks for that.
That's an image you can't get in your mind. I think it's in Thief's Journal that he talks about it. Mm-hmm. This is just called Instructions. Edit World War II for correctness. And polish up Vietnam, updating for verb tense. And Ulipo, the Korean War. And poeticize the Boer War. And freeze frame the first decade of the Afghan War. And multiply by the Cuban blockade. And be sure to carry the 7. This one is called Float for Charles Baxter. But it's actually one of the obsessions that came back, of course. I spent my early youth just being terrified, looking up at the sky, waiting for the missiles to land in 61, 62, 63. And of course, you know, with the current POTUS, all of a sudden I have that same fear that resumes. You know, I thought, holy shit, do I really need this, or do any of us? But this is just,
No.
damn right. But this is called Float by Charles Pettit. Hibakusha is my poorly pronounced Japanese for a term, explosion-affected people. Oh boy. Hibakusha float by, petals on that great black sea. There's no rush in the metro, only 8 trillion tons of rock waiting for its train. There is no rain where it's burning, and no sun. Rather, hundreds of little suns, graffiti of life lived, however briefly, at 10,000 degrees Kelvin. And you know what one of my pet peeves is? When they moved the Hiroshima monument down at City Hall in the front, and they tucked it away somewhere else during Coke Mayor. Right. Coke Mayor. Anyway, this is not about me, this is about you. No title for this one, but science fiction is, of course, another fixation of mine. During the eclipse, I will tell the rose it is sick, visit the Atacama Desert, and take a huge dump in the closest telescope. I'll sneak back home and call the New York Times and local radio and tell them I think the sun aliens left us something. Oh, it's a sleeper. It's a sleeper. Now, I'm going to end with, this is a really old book. This is a book that came out in '98, so it's, what, 19? So it can smoke, it can drink, it can vote, and soon, presumably, it can buy weed. So basically, I resurrected this old book, and there's a piece in it I don't think I've ever read. But why not do it for you now? And it's a piece called, basically this book summarizes in some 90 pages a decade of work for the Sandinistas and for the FMLN. But the Popol Vuh repair shop. The Popol Vuh is a creation myth of one of the indigenous groups in Guatemala. And unfortunately, there are very few copies left. But the Popol Vuh repair shop, where they don't do such good work, just ask Bartolomeo de las Casas, an angry priest who saw them take the holy books, in fact all the books, which were in the back seat of a civilization, toss them on a heap and burn them at the end of a hard work day. You just drive history in, brand new off the lot, leave it in their hands, you'll see what I mean. First they'll give you an estimate, scribbled across the august newspaper of record of the day. Words will smear your trembling hands and dirty the first clean thing you touch. And the figures, they'll stand by. If you look at them closely, they wriggle and slide into each other worse than a bad case of heartworm, until you can't know the cost. But there ain't a lot of choice, given the complicated stuff under the hood of history these days. You've always meant to get a few books and do it yourself, but minutes after you agree that consensus is a good thing, and somehow you've participated in their choice and it's in their hands, they've unleashed the imps, and before your very eyes the damn thing has disappeared under a swirl of activity which is convincing but unsettling. There are noises that do not sound healthy, but they're explained away as a painful but necessary part of a process that's actually indeed out of their hands, and of which they are as much victims as you, and you're not sure exactly what this means. But something's getting done. It's at least better than history sitting out there on the street with no chance of going anywhere in it. Someone is using a big lie brand hammer to pound some sense into cylinders of event. Somewhere there's a screech of something being born, then the repeated clang of it dying. And by the time you're on your way back from the battered pop machine of indulgence, or dangling the oversized key to the dirtiest washroom of poverty, no telling how much time this will take, still echoing in your ears, some expert hands you the bill and places you behind the wheel, which you've got a faint memory pointed toward, not away from the engine. And wasn't there a windshield? Oh, it's off that way, I see. Well, I don't. And it doesn't seem to move. You start to complain just as their best imp swings that omnipurpose wrench toward what will soon used to be your eyes. And on that note, thank you very much. And
Oh, jeez. Hey, I'm the communist. Thank you, Kirby, for this lovely space and your warmth and generosity, and to my co-conspirators here. So tonight, I'm not going to read anything from our collaborations, but I'm going to read, all the pieces I'm going to read from tonight are pieces that I've been working on that are sourced from self-help books. I work for the Toronto Public Library, and there are tons of crazy-ass self-help books. Hey! So yeah. First one is called Fascists, Coffee Addicts, and Bastards, After How to Sound Cultured. The dinner party is more chewing the fat about Rambo than conjuring Wittgenstein. But after the pie and uncorking, the room grows thick with nostalgia. Superheroes are dropped in favor of the topology of Mobius strips, the sculpture of Rumi's syllables, Kandinsky's egg-yolked cow. There is liquor, ruleless gin rummy and cigarettes, the cat long forgotten in the garden shed, and an impulse to turn the tongue into an ephemeral cloud of eloquence. A desire to Noam Chomsky your way around the Ouija board, to retell the little match girl using Doris Lessing's lightning, to eat the orange straight out of Plato's hand. Somehow the sky turns to lugubrious night, and the chords of history settle around us like ghosts. Spoons rattle through the enormous room held safely in the rain's tiny hands. Women come and go, conversations splayed over the shoulders of Andalusian dogs with blue, blue eyes. The cake is in the shape of Andy Warhol frosted with Pauline Bote's Sheba. Our jawbones crack in sync with the pearly drops of Satie's Danse Gothique. Someone opens a window. Jackson Pollock climbs in wearing a merry-go-round. The guests collapse into an exhausted equation of themselves. The great thing about doing this project is that it gives me a whole new lexicon. You know, words that I would never ever use in poems. And this is a great example of one. This is called Eating the Woods, After How to Stay Alive in the Woods. Burdock, chokecherry, cowslip, knotweed, if we survive. Oleander, lantana, chinaberry, and cowage, if we don't. Here in the wild wilderness of our smallness, common interned places darkening under a fiddlehead moon, day 6 of Lost in the Woods. Black spur, milk bitter, close your eyes, press the dream of water to your lips, sassafras, jelly gumbo, and the birds flock. Sumac winter twig, lemonade tree, bruising leaves on skin, staghorn velvet earth from the Maritimes to Georgia to Missouri, still hunting, bird pole, at sea in the sweet flag patch as the woodpecker works our coffin wood. Prayers navigating their way through buttonholes, past the shepherd's purse, past the dandelion, all the way to the bone, and night, like a greasy mechanic with arms stretched wide, comes carrying the weed Bible in place of Sunday. So there's a lot of sort of real outdoorsy kinds of books that I've used, which I thought were kind of fun because that's nothing I would normally write about. This one's called Gravity Sucker Punch, After the Great Outdoors, A User's Guide. And this one's about, this section is about climbing, rock climbing. We tie the double fishermen's, life to life up Indian Creek, Talus, where we discern this as the final edit, crimp by crimp closing in on Ursa Minor, lungs hollering airless, fish hooked, counting ribs, to drink the quiet water that's pooled in yesterday's collected noise. Up the face, up the shale, dangerous places unburdened by laughter, chiseling our way up night's spine, cartilage deep in it, gravity sucker punch, the body falters, flutters like a kimono, not yet ready for the Milky Way. sparrow-proof house, after How to Charm a Bird. This one's all about building birdhouses. One caveat, not all birds are seed enthusiasts. We leave out crushed eggshells, okra, and soybeans. Build a wren house, nesting shelf, hanging gazebo, a winter feeder, and a snack shack. The jars in the window's ledge filled with suet, white millet, and orange halves, laid out like Sunday dinner in the redness of afternoon. And the house leans into its shadow, ripe for the onslaught of famished jays, beaks vibrating, already in search of softer places. Oh, it says, and there is a subtle shift in seasons, a small paradox tucked deep into the snakewood. The world is a church, and the black-eyed Susans quiver in the redness of afternoon. Here we stand next to Columbine, adrift in their violet chaos, night already on its way, a deterrent perhaps for the scavengers. Oh, says the house, and the angel in the keyhole steadies our palms just enough to hold the what of this day. So, I guess you guys know about this thing called, I'm going to try and pronounce it the right way, hygge. Have you heard of that? Yeah. So it's, where is it from exactly? Danish? Denmark, yes, from Denmark. There's this whole feeling of hygge. It's like coziness, comfort, hominess, that kind of thing. So this one is called How to Weave a Heart after the Little Book of Hygge. A man named Hans Christian Andersen carries the oldest known heart to the Mojave Desert, pleating the flaps of joy into a strange shape that a small child will one day call a book. He travels north and more north to where he is drawn in by an August meadow, and it is here, next to the hawthorn bush, under the Perseus constellation, that the bunker in his chest opens wide. The sky will surely fall soon, he thinks, but for now, it is laid out like a soft skin, dappled with 1,000 pinpricks, letting in the light, tiny teeth coming for him. Sleep comes, laden with dreams of fire and foraging for mushroom and chestnut, wraps itself round him like muscle, and he remembers. When flap 5 has been woven through flap A, the heart is complete. Small love. After How to Be a Bad Christian. And this is an actual book. After I paid the bill, the one that the waitress had given me, the waitress who was now leaning down into my shadow, the waitress who was now telling me something, who was now saying that I would soon be bumping into God, maybe on the beach or at Holy Joe's, but never in a church, no, never in church. And then Nick Cave was on the radio, and the waitress was pointing her finger up to the sky, the air, the speaker, whatever. Nick's voice singing, "She's got a house big heart where we all live." And I wondered if maybe he was singing about the waitress, but no. He was singing about how to think with your soul. And it's a mile from the nearest road, and I need to get out of here, to the ravine, to the movies, the laundromat, anywhere. To remember Fast Eddie's funeral and his words before that, forgiving me even when I didn't want to be forgiven. I need to walk under a lumpy sky, to graze the clouds, never minding heaven, to feel another kind of giantness as I walk and I walk through the hollow way. But there's a small love on the chair next to me, and it's made of death and snot and bicycles, infinite possibilities and goose bones, razor blades and voices, and it reminds me of the preacher standing by the water in his underwear. And I let it. I just let it. Okay, a couple more, is that okay? This one is called Abraham's Oak, after a short guide to a long life. They say, grow a garden, but my brother is cancer, sitting by the sepia tree, skin stretched over the endless unhappiness of bones, lungs already flapping like a trapped bird in search of air. They say, start with parsley, basil, mint, sage, but his tongue is a house on fire, bacteria multiplying like a dark mathematics, weeping into the roots of the voodoo tree, almost home. They say, eat more like the French, but the biopsy is a moon rock in place of truffle eggs and honey. The branches of the baobab already wizened by lightning, a waiting room sheer as gauze. They say gallons of breath, but the heart is a fist, clenched around the wind, an embryo of time as weightless and as fleeting as the swish of the willow branch. They say comply, but the muzzle is already too tight. The ivy drip, 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 goose-stepping into the hole, a broken wing splayed at the foot of Abraham's oak, where once a sun. And the last piece I'm going to read is called Schmeckala, Small is Beautiful, after How to Be a Mensch and Not a Schmuck. There is a very dark schmuckery surrounding the Empire State Building. The Schmendricks are building an X-ray machine to explain the perpetual tans. The schmuckification of gills, scales, and oceans is your legacy squeezed into hot pants. The schmuck wearing librettos as underwear is jackhammering the White House into the shape of his rage. The schmuck standing next to him is holding his etiquette, small as a jewel, small as a schmeckle. Thank you.
Thank you. Friday nights, this is what we do.
All right.
We serve poetry. It's served well. Nicholas, Lillian, Jim, thank you so very much for tonight. It's also the one poetry series that you can come in, get a meal of poetry, and go out and drink and have a good time. As opposed to waiting for the next poet 20 minutes, still having it, that sort of thing. So that's kind of a sweet thing that goes on here too. And it's free. And we have books for sale. So please have a look. I can recommend Nicholas's, and Jim has these great with back office ads, and I love that cover. And just one thing. This is a lovely chapbook by Nicholas Tarr called A Wild Uncertainty. And the opening line of A Wild Uncertainty is, the wisdom of water finding its own level. Thank you for that.
Thank you for reading it.
Have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much. Joy, I'll be up front if you'd like to.